What is up, everyone? Welcome to this week's NerdBall Fantasy Football Show. I am your humble host and astronaut aboard the Pitts 8 Moon Expedition, Pete Rogers, and I am joined today by all of the nerds. We have resident old man and vice secretary of the Sam Darnold Hype Train Railroad LLC, Clark Barnes, lead saxophonist for Deami Brown and the Downtown Funky Crown Band, the working girl Jordan Smith, and founder and lone member of the Devontae Adams' Average Club, the Ginger Woodsman Nick Bodiford. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great, Pete.
Doing good.
Pretty average, Pete. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. Nick, I'm glad to see that you're living up to your club. That's important. You have to live and breathe, kind of the identity that has been assigned to you. That's how branding works. Speaking of branding, Jordan, I knew you would be very pleased by this, but so Becca is one of her like movie guilty pleasures is the Harry Potter series, in the sense that like she's constantly like, I want to watch this. And since she's now pregnant, I have to oblige. But I have made a compromise with her in that we watch the first Harry Potter and then we then have to watch the subsequent Fast and the Furious movie. And we alternate between them so we can catch up and watch the entire Fast and the Furious series whilst she gets, and actually she watched the first one and it was like, I'm in, I am hooked onto this narrative. So there you go. Fast and the Furious winning Harry Potter fans over since 2012, 21. That's the year we're in.
I mean, I know she's not, is she that far along? Are you trying to induce labor by making her watch these thrilling Fast and Furious movies? Like, what's going on, Pete?
Try to pop the twins out real early. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to catch up. Really what I'm most curious about is I've seen the first few and then the last few, but I haven't seen the middle parts. And so I'm really curious to see like where exactly in the middle of the Fast and the Furious series does it go from like kind of, cop caper movie to we are launching cars into space and doing wildly absurd stunts. When does that transition occur? That's what I'm most excited about and most intrigued by.
4 to 5.
4 to 5. Okay. Good
yeah, depending on your take on what 4 is, but 5 definitely once Dwayne Johnson enters the fold. But I'm sure every listener right now is very thrilled by this fast talk. So we can get started with the news.
Oh, well, fast talk is always what's important. That's what the people are here for. The people are here for some occasional fantasy, but mostly Fast and the Furious talk. And Clark Barnes' collection of hats, which he has so graciously brought back. Well done, Clark. For those who engage in the video formats. All right. We're going to talk quarterbacks on today's show. We're doing positional weeks at nerdballff.com, so go check it out. And we're going to do a deep dive into the position. But before we do that, let's hit some news. And leading off the news, Nikhil Harry, wide receiver for the New England Patriots, has officially requested a trade through his agent. I guess this is like, as I am someone who I want Nikhil Harry to succeed. I'm a big fan of his. I was very excited to see the Patriots draft a wide receiver in the first round when they took him. However, I was not thrilled to see the fact that that receiver was the worst out of the receivers taken in that draft class. AJ Brown going behind Nikhil Harry will forever haunt me. But it does seem like he is a player who needs a change of scenery just because it hasn't been working in New England. Nick, is there any potential landing spot for Nikhil Harry that would give him any fantasy value in your mind for 2021?
No, not for 2021. That's pushing it. I mean, it's possible that he could go like turn it around somewhere after a few years of working in a new system and working with, maybe I don't know, better wide receivers coaches. I don't know how much the Pats wide receivers coaches have really developed guys. I mean, they've kind of like added a lot of good players, but
you got Julian Edelman in there. He was a quarterback.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess okay. So they got.
But they definitely have a type. They have a type. There's a reason why Wes Welker and Deion Branch and Julian Edelman and like the reason why those wide receivers thrived in New England. They haven't really developed outside of trading for Randy Moss, your typical X or Z receiver who plays on the outside.
Don't forget Brandon Lloyd.
And I do love me some Brandon Lloyd, the most photogenic wide receiver in the history of the NFL.
But yeah, I don't think anywhere for 2021 would be interesting.
Yeah. I'm curious as to whether or not he actually even has trade value. This seems to me more like a preemptive, we are kind of thinking we're going to get cut, and Harry's agent was like, we're going to float this out there. We're going to request a trade and see if we can beat the bad news of getting cut and instead get traded for a, conditional 7th round pick. Yeah. Hoping all the best for you, Harry. I want you to succeed, even if it's not in New England, though. Yeah, would love for that to happen. I also think the Patriots need to cheat more so that Goodell takes away their 1st round picks to save Bill Belichick from himself, because Bill's 1st round pick selection, not a good track record.
Well, as we discovered from, yourteamcheats.com, the Patriots are only the 3rd most cheaty team in the AFC East.
I mean, do we have a bad boy reputation? We do. And we live and die by it. We fully accept it. And a lot of other teams mainly looking at you, New York Jets. Cheat like hell. So, yeah. Potato, tomato. Moving on to the news, we have some beat quotes, because this is always that time of year where beat writers come out and offer a little conversation starters out there, and we're lacking for news, and so we eat it right up. Let's see, what do we got for Zach Bierman in Philly? Says that Dallas Goddard is expected to, quote, be a feature in new coach Nick Sirianni's offense. Clark, is there a world in which you see Dallas Goddard finishing a potential top 5 tight end this year?
Yeah, it's top 5 tight end doesn't mean much. The cutoff for tight end is 3 are worth having. And, Rob Gronkowski was the 6th tight end last year, just catching a lot of touchdowns. So sure, this is my absolute favorite time of the year, because writers have to write something out. They have a boss and
gotta
they're
put
content. I saw a beautiful one that you did a story on, which I liked. A little blurb. It's Etienne expected to be receiving back. That's what we expect. And it's a whole story. I love the whole story. It's he's good. He's talented, and there's a new offense. Sure.
I just love how Clark is basically after those first 3 tight ends, I don't care. You take whoever you want. I think Goddard has shown plenty of flashes with Ertz out when he was out and taking that tight end 1 spot. I think he's not a bad flyer or a guy to take as a going. I think he's going tight end. Yeah, probably back of the top 10.
You should definitely talk yourself into drafting the 2nd tight end for a team with a quarterback who can't pass. Yeah.
Clark's stamp of approval on the Philadelphia Eagles' future.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Yeah.
I secretly think you can get good value for Dallas Goddard. I do believe that a lot of people might forget about him, and he might slip a little bit worried about the Zach Ertz situation, but I don't even think Zach Ertz is going to be there for the start of the season. I don't even know if he's around right now. He was floated in trade talks or wanted to be traded, etc. But I was just looking, and Goddard in his rookie year was tight end 20, still with Ertz and kind of a prime Ertz at that point too. 10 the next year, and then he kind of slipped to 20 again last year because he only played 11 games. But I think he's a pretty valuable commodity, and if you have a guy who you're worried about throwing the ball, then that's a pretty good safety blanket to have a tight end who could just move the sticks. And I think Goddard is that. Top 5 might be a stretch though, but
top 5 might be a stretch. You got to make it saucy. Just like how you have to spin Travis Etienne possibly might be likely catching passes out of the backfield. Got to make it saucy. Top 5, saucy, gets the people listening, gets the people tuned in. Moving on to beat writer blurbs. Raheem Mostert, according to Matt Barrows, quote, almost certainly 49ers lead back if healthy. Jordan, should Mostert be the first 49ers back off draft boards in your fantasy drafts with that knowledge, or is it still we still like trusting that Trey Sermon is ultimately going to take over this backfield or or do more with his role to be more valuable in fantasy this year?
I'm a little uncertain. The health of Raheem Mostert has always worried me a little bit, but at the same time, didn't we just see a report like a week or two ago that said Trey Sermon was going to be getting a lot of carries in the offense as well? So I don't know. I feel like that one I'm going to wait until I actually see or hear from like training camp, preseason games when they're actually getting on the field and practicing, who is actually getting like the highest percentage of carries with the ones and all that stuff. So I don't know. I'm still skeptical on both, but I might lean Trey Sermon for the upside.
Yeah, I really like the preseason mention. If Raheem Mostert plays 15 snaps a game and it's the first 15, then you should definitely be drafting him as the starter.
Yeah. I think I'm with you, Jordan. I would still tentatively lean in favor of Trey Sermon just because I do think that eventually we've seen the Raheem Mostert narrative enough where he starts off really great and then tweaks himself because he's just too damn fast and he's the Will Fuller effect of running through his hamstrings. So they just combust. And then I just feel like once Trey Sermon takes over this backfield, he's not going to relinquish it, but maybe I am wrong.
So, I mean, Sermon's going in the 10th round right now per fantasy football calculator in half
that is
PBR
saucy.
League. So a 10th round Sermon pick or a 4th round Mostert pick. Like, I don't care if Mostert's the lead back for the whole season. I know, like, I want to draft Trey Sermon. And then even if he's getting 10 touches per week, like that will return way more value than Mostert will, even if they play full season together, because no one's going to get, I mean, maybe Shanahan will prove us wrong, but Shanahan, I think it was last offseason, he was giving an interview and he like realized that he came across the statistic that his own team, the Niners, used their third running back at the highest rate in the league. And he like, while being interviewed, just brought this up and thought that was so peculiar. And so like, even he's unaware of how much like so many backs get so many touches in this offense, and to have one that's going to get like, 10% fewer touches 6 rounds later. Yeah. I want that guy.
I was trying to find a quote. I saw it. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I saw some quote from some beat writer saying that Kyle Shanahan wants to give like 500 touches to his backfield this year, which I am here for. Just buy any piece of it, and it's going to be fantasy viable with Kyle Shanahan calling the shots and showing just a general lack of faith in Jimmy Garoppolo until Trey Lance takes over.
I know we can only use the information that we have with ADP, but I'm looking at our NerdBall friends and family mock, and I don't think Raheem Mostert was drafted.
No, I drafted him.
Okay,
I drafted him way late. I mean, I think he was like my second back, but I didn't take it back till the
in the seventh.
Yeah, okay.
and I think Sermon went before that. So I think that's where we're headed with ADP. Just to throw that in there.
In which case, I will take Mostert. If that's
so basically you just want the cheaper back, which is fair.
Both are fine.
Yeah,
and I love Sermon, but Nick has pointed out a couple of times and made really good points about with his doctor friend online about the injury history of Trey Sermon. I have decided I am going to ignore that, but that is folly. I mean, it's a back who has been hurt a couple of times in college. It may continue here, and no one stays healthy in San Francisco's backfield.
No one does.
I mean, I think when they do, we're going to have the next Clinton Portis, like the guy who came from nowhere, just absolutely dominates for 3 years. But until then, they're both going to end up going pretty late because people can't decide which one they want.
Yeah. No, do you want? Sorry, Becca's asking me for the laptop charger. Yes. As always, go with the cheaper back, especially in this backfield. So there you go. That's it. That's it for the news. Before we talk quarterbacks, I wanted to quickly let you know that we have a Patreon, patreon.com/nerdballff, and we offer all kinds of perks to those who subscribe. We got a Discord channel to talk football, around the clock start and sit advice, play in a league with us this year, all kinds of goodies. Plus, during the season, we want to have a mailbag section to the podcast where we answer your questions. So if you want to make sure your most pressing cues throughout the year make it onto the show, consider supporting us over on our Patreon, patreon.com/nerdballff. All right. After that quick little advertisement break, let's talk quarterbacks. Like I said at the top of the show, it's positional week on the site. So we're running through each position, top four, QBs, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. And we're doing a deep dive into the position throughout the week. We started this week with Patty Cooper's top 30 QBs for the year. So you should go check that out at the site. Today, we're going to do our own deep dive. We have 4 categories we're going to talk about to make sure that you are drafting the quarterback position smartly and successfully this year. We have our top quarterback who we're targeting in the first 5 rounds, the top quarterback we're targeting going in the 11th round or later, the QB we're avoiding this year at their ADP, and finally, one bold prediction to wrap up the position. So let's start with our top QB target going in the first 5 rounds, also known as
Big spender. Spend a little time with me.
Start us off, Clark. Who's your big
Finally,
spender?
a reference that speaks to my time and era. I really appreciate it.
Just for you, Clark.
Yeah. My big spender target's Lamar Jackson. I think that people are a little bit too down on him because of his poor passing production last year. The Ravens spent a lot of time this offseason trying to improve the wide receiver core, and I think that they did. They spent their first round pick on Rashad Bateman, who is, one of Matt Waldman's favorite wide receivers. And if nothing else, he's a good, solid 6'1", good sized wide receiver. I think Marquise Brown is good, but he's 5'9" and he's a burner. I don't think that he's good enough to make everyone around him better. They signed Sammy Watkins. People kind of sniggered at that, but Watkins is probably better than Willie Snead. So they are making moves and at least spending assets to get Lamar Jackson more around him. And finally, just watching Jackson play, I believe he can pass. I believe that he can do it. I think he needs a coach who allows him to learn and grow and build confidence. But that with Lamar Jackson has rushed for 1,000 yards 2 years in a row makes me think, just a small step forward in the passing game. And we're back to Lamar Jackson as, number 1, number 2 fantasy QB.
Yeah. He's going as the QB4, beginning of the 5th round, according to Fantasy Football Calculator. He's also my big spender for this show. From week 13 onward, he was the QB2 last year behind Josh Allen. He started running the ball a little bit more. The Ravens offense kind of opened up. But what you were saying, Clark, is I think the main thing is that they invested in their passing game. And it wasn't just like buying down on the Marquise Brownses of the world, which are like, small speedsters who can get down the field. It's like big body receivers, Sammy Watkins and Rashad Bateman, guys who can win on their route, who can win at the catch point, guys who can get open and are just like all around fundamentally sound wide receivers, as opposed to like doing one thing exceptionally well. So I have a lot of faith that this passing game is going to take that step forward. And even if even if it's a minor step forward, Lamar Jackson's rushing is so consistent and so reliable and already makes him such a high floor fantasy player that with a passing game that might return to what we saw in 2019 or in 2019 when he won MVP, you're going to get another QB1, QB2 on your hands at a slight discount.
Yeah, I like the fact that the Ravens definitely did some things to bolster their receiving core with different types of players than what they were drafting the past couple of years. Like, speaking of teams that aren't very good at developing wide receivers, the Ravens might be one of them. Like Marquise Brown is a pretty talented athlete, but he hasn't really shown much return like his cousin Antonio Brown. And then they have Miles Boykin, who they also drafted that I was pretty high on because he was like a 99 percentile like spark score athlete, but he just hasn't been able to develop into much. So they went the other way. They get brought in a veteran Watkins, who Clark said is better than Willie Snead, and that's probably true. And then Rashad Bateman, who I thought was the most pro-ready wide receiver coming right out of the draft, just because he's such a good route runner. So that'll definitely help the passing game a ton. But at the same time, I think Lamar's like people are kind of down on him and drafting a few others ahead of him. I just kind of think this isn't a situation where you should get cute. Lamar Jackson should be still one of the top 3 quarterbacks coming off the board. Don't let him drop below that if you really want to get a rushing guy.
Agreed. Jordan, go ahead, Nick. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just like this ADP a lot more than I did last year, where he was going like in the late second round. It's a much improved team. It's just another year that a young quarterback got to develop. As Jordan just mentioned, they added an excellent pass catcher in Rashad Bateman. It's just like it's a better situation, and you can get him 3 rounds later than last year. I like that a lot.
Totally. I do a weekly mock draft just using Fantasy Pros mock simulator. And last week I got Lamar Jackson in the 5th round. And I was just like, this is perfect. Like, I'm super happy to have, like, you are still spending a high pick on a quarterback, but it's basically at that tail end of that top group of guys. And the names he's going around, I don't feel like are as much of a lock to be a top 1 or 2 guy as Lamar Jackson. Jordan, who's your big spender for this year?
So at the risk of falling into the same traps that we did last year by hyping up the Cowboys offense, I'm going with Dak Prescott.
How could you not, though?
Right now he is going in the 5th round, I believe. I did not write that down, and I should have, but point being, in his first 3 years, he was like a 28 to 30 touchdown guy with 6 rushing touchdowns in his first 3 years. And 1 year he did only have 3, but that was when he did throw for 30 passing touchdowns and like 5,000 yards. So we'll give him a pass on that one. And last year he did already have 3 rushing touchdowns in 5 games before the injury. So that looked like it was trending back towards like the 6 rushing touchdown direction. In his 4 full seasons as a starter, he's averaging 3,069 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns, 305 rushing yards, and 5 touchdowns with only 9 picks on average, and only loses about 4.5 fumbles per season. So he's not very turnover prone. He averages in fantasy as QB 8 around there, with a high of QB 2 and a low of QB 14. So basically, Dak is a very high floor guy. He fits that mold in terms of consistency. McCarthy may hold him back a little bit, and we kind of saw what the limitations of the offense could be last year, but I don't see that being much worse than the Jason Garrett years if we get a full season of Dak there. So if you're using a high pick on a QB, I just kind of want to make sure it's on a guy that I'm confident is not going to bust or fall into some old bad habits, because I don't really see Dak having a lot of bad habits. He's not like the Josh Allen type who suddenly blows up 1 year, or one of those guys that you're kind of buying is going to take a next step. He's already at a certain level, and I just like that with my quarterback. So I'm excited to see what he can do with this offense this year, getting in a full season of work.
Also, when he was healthy, he was like dominant last year to start the season. I don't remember what week he got injured in. Was it like week 4?
Yeah,
He was week.
I have that
4.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was week 5 that he got hurt. But like these passing totals are preposterous. I mean, he had a quote unquote slow week in week 1 by only throwing for 266 yards and a touchdown. After that, his lowest passing yard total was 450. He was averaging, it is insane. He was averaging 31.3 fantasy points per game. He was the overall quarterback 1. Like, and this is another one where like everybody's got another year in the offense. This is a
CeeDee Lamb's going to be even better. Like, don't overthink it. This is yes. Honestly, I know I'm going to be interested to hear what you have to say, Nick, but like when it comes to these top kind of like 5 guys, the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, God, I have a really hard time going away from either. If I'm going to spend high on a QB, I have a hard time picking anyone other than Lamar or Dak, just given their upside. But yeah, Nick, you think your high spender is not one of those guys.
Yeah, so I just finished writing up a marathon piece on the Buffalo Bills passing offense.
Which you should go read. NerdBallFF.com.
Thank you. Yeah, and heads up, that's the precursor to the AFC East divisional preview. But what I really liked when researching this team was the way that Sean McDermott and Brian Dable improved in each of their years together. So last year they cranked up their first half early down passing rate to 64%. It was the second highest early down passing rate in the league. And like the success that they had found before that kind of wavered once they did that and then acquired Stephon Diggs. The offense just took off. And I love the fact that they then brought in Emmanuel Sanders. And what will be funny if you get into the piece that I'm sure listeners will notice from our debates is that I'm actually like the lowest on the group.
You hate Emmanuel Sanders. You think he's a terrible wide receiver. Terrible signing by the Bills.
As of the recent rankings, I think I've also got him ranked highest of anybody on the site. So like I'm just really high on the whole Bills passing game. Their schedule this year is very similar to last year. Both the offenses and defenses are really middle of the road. There are some efficiency marks that like the opponent kind of spike, but more or less this is going to be another season of the Bills just imposing their offensive will on their opponents. They also suffered a bunch of injuries at the guard positions last year. So they kind of had a rotation of guys who were filling in. That's going to be ironed out at least entering the season. So theoretically we could have a fully healthy offensive line working for them too. And just in terms of Josh Allen, I mean, he took massive steps as a passer. And one thing we also kind of like to see is his rushing total, like his rushing yardage total was the lowest of his career last year at 421 yards, but he maintained his rushing touchdown rate. He had 8 in rookie season. He had 9 the sophomore season. And then last year he had 8 again. He had the third highest red zone rushing total. So there's on the team, they scaled back his rushing just a hair, but he's still just because he's this beast, he just kind of is able to maintain that high touchdown rate, rushing rate in the red zone. This is a guy who's really hard to miss on. And I'm sort of departing from my long-term strategy of pick the absolute last 2 quarterbacks in your draft and actually like find some elite value. Cause I think the drafting market has caught up with the times. But if you were able to start this, your draft, by drafting like Stephon Diggs at the end of the first or early second, and then coming back around in the fourth and taking Josh Allen, I don't think you're going to be upset with your 2021 season.
He's a guy who I think if he does it again at a high level, doesn't need to be what he did last year, because what he did last year was, insane. If he does it again at a high level, I'm all in. Like I am sold. I am like, I will treat Josh Allen as a top 5 quarterback from here on out in terms of fantasy. My only worry is like, if you are spending that high of a pick on someone, you really want to make sure that there's no potential for them to, outside of barring injuries, to kind of fall out of that spot. But of the guys that like that offense is beautifully constructed. He thrived in it last year. So there's little reason to think that he's not going to do it again this year, unless that was a fluke year, but I'm willing to take that chance.
Yeah, just 2 quick notes on these guys. The being able to sustain these rushing touchdowns, they've both done it. Dak and Josh Allen, I believe, have done it enough to say like it's not a fluke. They are very large men who can scoot a little bit, and especially are getting better at doing that in the red zone. And both of these teams are largely intact from when these players had these outstanding moments. So, Josh Allen did it all year and still has the same offensive coordinators. His receivers are coming back, I'd say upgraded with Emmanuel Sanders. Not much changed in Dallas other than, the offensive line maybe getting a little healthier and Dak not being injured. The nucleus is still there. So I think these are also 2 solid picks if you're going to spend up.
All right, well, let's move on to the guys who you can sit on and wait to come around. These guys are all being drafted in the 11th round or later. Guys, who we like to do?
Hey, Macklemore, can we go thrift shopping?
Little thrift shopping. And we're going down to the 11th or later round. Jordan, start us off. Who are you thrift shopping for at the quarterback position this year?
So kind of going back to the 49ers speak a little bit earlier, I'm going to go thrift shopping for Trey Lance, who is not going off the board until the 14th round. And if I'm going late on a QB, I'm going to gamble on someone who I believe is going to jump into a top 10 range. And I think Lance is he has the talent to do so. He's a very smart quarterback with rushing upside. Like, I mean, Josh Allen, speaking of just thick boys who can run the football, like Trey Lance is definitely one of those as well. Like Lance was a first round pick that San Francisco traded up for as well. So I don't think there's any reason to believe that he won't start at some point. It's just kind of a matter of when. And I was actually just playing around with over the cap, and it kind of makes a lot of sense for San Francisco to get Jimmy G out of the way. They were really smart with his contract when he initially signed it, and they like loaded it up front pretty heavily. So right now they can actually gain like $28 million back if they trade him. So that's something to keep an eye out for. And in redraft, this is just kind of a strategy for myself. I have notoriously taken gambles on guys who like might miss the first month with an injury or who've been like suspended for something dumb like weed. And if you trust yourself to build a team that can win until a really good player gets in on the action, then that's great. I have a fantasy seasons or marathons, not a sprint mindset. And like I said before, with the coaching staff and the talent, I think his floor is very high, and he has a good pass catching trio that can just eat up yak yards. So he doesn't even have to carry all of the like passing yard work on his shoulders because he's got Ayuk and Kittle and Deebo Samuel, who will do a lot of that heavy lifting for him.
I can confirm 49ers fan Nick Botiford, not a fan of this pick.
Yeah, what I gotta like is the quarterback 9.
Yeah, Nick has him like quarterback 6 or some shit on the rankings.
He's this is one of those where you're to take Trey Lance and to bank on him this year, you are embracing the idea that you want to finish. So actually, I think maybe Jordan and I are approaching this from different angles. I'm approaching this from, I either want to finish first or I don't care. And if it's like a keeper or dynasty league, then great, I'm going to win on this pick. I mean, very high probability of winning on this pick. I think that the guy has a chance to start in week 1. So I'm not necessarily looking at the marathon aspect as much, but I mean, yeah, what he has the potential to do is like, it's going to be really, really fun to watch. He could have ended up in a better situation. If you liked watching RG3 for that one season, you're going to like Trey Lance.
It's also an offense. We've talked a lot about this too, where like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel have both shown incredible yak work, and George Kittle's a phenomenal target that you just can't miss. And so like the offense is all perfectly set up for a rookie quarterback to like hide all of the struggles that a rookie quarterback typically goes through, while still giving him plenty of like the weapons around him to put up great numbers. And so going as Trey Lance on FF calculator, QB 21, beginning of the 14th round. My God, that is stealing from a child.
It's awesome. And one thing that I really didn't expect to see, and I'm pulling the data up right now via sharpfootballstats.com, but I had no idea until this offseason how frequently Shanahan has his team throw 2 running backs on early downs. I thought it was way more of a run-centric approach, but he's like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th highest early down pass rate to running backs. So to your point about like just giving a rookie quarterback all of the outs he could ever possibly want with those 2 yak receivers and George Kittle, it is a real deal perfect situation for a promising rookie passer to enter.
Yeah, certainly seems that way. Jordan, did you mean to be unmuted?
Sorry, I thought I clicked that because I was looking down. Put that into contrast, like with the fantasy football calculator that we're using, Justin Fields and Trey Lance kind of have the same ADP at 14. Yeah, Justin Fields going 1 slot behind him, though, if you're looking at the real pick slot. And I just think that, though I want Justin Fields to be a successful NFL quarterback, he is not in as good of a situation as Trey Lance is. So that's where I'm leaning that too.
Trevor Lawrence is going 4 rounds earlier, and I would rather have Trey Lance. Like Trevor Lawrence is not good. I mean, he's going to be a really good quarterback. He's going to help the Jaguars offense a lot. Clark is very doubtful about that. Travis Etienne is going to catch so many passes from him out of the backfield, right?
Time will tell.
But Trey Lance is the clear guy to get. Nick, who you're thrift shopping for this year?
So funny story about the intro there with the Macklemore loop. I once tried to talk to Macklemore. Actually, I've tried to talk to him a couple times because he lives in Seattle. Doesn't like to be approached in public. So don't try to do that.
Fun anecdote. Don't approach Macklemore in the streets and try to engage with them.
I also purchased, this is probably bad, I should share this, but I also purchased a pitcher for him in a bar before I knew that he had a problem with alcohol.
Nick, like he half of his songs are about his addiction, his struggles with addiction.
I only knew like 3 of them at the time. But
well done, Nick.
I didn't know that even now.
Yeah.
I'm learning that right now.
It was, yeah. Okay, so anyway, moving on to my
headlines. Nick Bodiford tries to get Macklemore drunk
off the wagon.
Fails miserably.
So Baker Mayfield. Mayfield is going.
Speaking of drinking.
Yeah. So he's going at the beginning of the 12th round per FF calculator. He's got a litany of weapons at his disposal this year. If what we were hearing was true, that Odell entered 2020 with like a bad hip that he got bad medical advice on, and that is now fixed. Plus if his ACL recovery is going as well as it is, I mean, we could see a very in shape, ready to play version of Beckham that we haven't really seen during his time in Cleveland. Landry is an extremely dependable slot receiver. I loved what I saw out of Donovan Peoples-Jones to close the season last year.
Mm-hmm.
Rashard Higgins is very reliable, and they drafted another burner, Anthony Schwartz, who I think ran sub 4.3. Their offensive line is in contention for best in the NFL. Their schedule, per Sharp Football Stats, is the second softest overall. I mean, it's setting up to be a dream schedule, and the way that they run their offense, obviously, they are really run centric, and that's why, you know, Mayfield is available as a quarterback too. They're still passing on first half early downs in the top half of the league. I think they're 15th in the NFL. They throw a lot of play action, they throw play action extremely efficiently. They run play action at the 16th highest rate in the league, but they totaled the 10th highest yardage total off of play action passes last year. This is a season where I think they have the strongest offensive units around Mayfield that he's ever had. He's been in the Stefanski system for a full season now, and we saw last year as the season progressed, he really kind of got off the ground. And again, it's an unimposing schedule. So I think this team is going to be able to impose their will, similar to the Buffalo Bills. Now, they're not going to have the gaudy yardage total, like passing total that the Bills have, just because they're not going to run as many plays, and they're not going to run as many plays through Baker Mayfield. But let's say you're trying to depend on someone like Trey Lance. To me, Mayfield is the perfect person to draft with him. You get a guy who's going to have a very high floor because of the efficiency of the scheme. And then you bring in Lance, you know, if it takes him a few weeks to win the starting job, and then you get this crazy ceiling guy who's rushing for 100 yards a game, this seems like a winning formula for us in 2021.
Plus, you left out the biggest Baker Mayfield perk. It's a contract year for him. The man's got to get paid.
Yeah.
The man's got to get paid.
Yeah, I think Baker's a great candidate to outperform his draft position, surely. We talked a lot about the Browns and the 49ers offenses. They're very similar offenses, come from the Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak school. The screen game numbers for San Francisco, just complete zero surprise, because almost every play starts exactly the same way, and then 90 different things happen from it. Stefanski's doing the same thing. I think Mayfield has a potential to have a very good season, and with him going 21, this is a good pick. Kind of like Matt Schaub back in the day. I think finished as the quarterback 4 or 5 a couple of times with Gary Kubiak. And like you said, Nick, not putting up gaudy numbers, but being extremely efficient and hitting a lot of deep touchdowns, because when you were trying to stop Arian Foster, 40 times a game, Andre Johnson just seemed to get behind the defense a lot. And the Browns have that same dynamic with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, And then, Jarvis Landry, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and, Odell Beckham. Even 90% Odell Beckham has, I think, enough to get open deep on some of these play actions. So he's free. And like you said, he can be a good safe complement for somebody that you're taking a huge swing at.
Ryan Tannehill has been a top 8 fantasy receiver the last 2 years, doing exactly what we think Baker could do. So, and Baker has a better arm, maybe.
I almost picked doing Baker just because I was looking at his roster and like there are no weaknesses along that offensive line. Like he might have top 5, top 10 guys at each position along that offensive line, which is like, I don't think anybody in the league has that. So he's going to be standing tall and delivering a lot of balls to like hopefully a healthy Odell and to Jarvis, who still can catch at least 80 balls a season. And all those other guys that they've added over the course of the past few years are going to be open, or they're going to get open because they're going to have time.
Yeah. All right. My thrift shop, the latest of the quarterbacks we're going to talk about, going QB 22 in the middle of the 13th round. Wait, what? Middle of the 14th round. Excuse me. I was like, how can he be 22 and going behind Trey Lance? Ryan Fitzpatrick, baby. There's no one to challenge him in Washington. He's going to get all of their starts. He's playing with Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, Curtis Samuel, De'Ami Brown, Logan Thomas. Good offensive line. He was the QB 8 last year from weeks 1 through 6 when he was starting for the Dolphins. And he just, to me, I think that his style of play with this offense is going to mesh wonderfully and beautifully. I have him ranked as my QB 15, and I think that's kind of low, to be honest. I am like going into many of my drafts, especially if they're super flex, with the distinct notion and plan of making sure I end up with Ryan Fitzpatrick on every single one of those teams as my QB2, or even as my QB1 if I really want to get saucy. I think he's a no doubter this year to be a late round guy you can get at the end of your drafts who will still return very high value.
No.
So I like the coaching staff that he has working with him right now. We like to see a guy like Scott Turner who can say, hey, you don't have to force that throw necessarily, right? Or do you to Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel? But they've got theoretically two plus pass catching backs in J.D. McKissick and fingers crossed Antonio Gibson. I think that this is a very good situation. And if the steps that Fitzpatrick seemingly took last year, which is the first time he was ever benched and he shouldn't have been benched, if those were real and this guy actually has turned kind of like a process-oriented corner, I think that he will have big-time spiked weeks.
Jordan, why are you hating on me?
To add to my short answer before is just that I think Fitzpatrick is in a pretty good situation for himself in terms of the pass catchers and all that. But I do think that expecting him to vastly outperform his draft spot is going to be asking a lot, especially since the last time he played a full season, all 16 games, was in 2015. He did play 15 games for Miami in 2019, but it's hard for me to see like the 38-year-old Fitzpatrick really climbing the ladder. But I guess at that round, if he's going really late and maybe if he's just already your second QB that you've drafted, then sure, like you can get some good value for him for like the weeks that he plays, or maybe he has a good matchup based week. But I don't know. I'm a little bit lower on Fitzpatrick than most. And
unacceptable. Yeah. Would you rather have Fitzpatrick or Carson Wentz this year in fantasy?
I'd rather have Carson Wentz because I'm pretty confident that Carson Wentz is going to start all of his games because Indianapolis cannot look stupid for trading for him. All
right. I'm shocked to see Clark hate on his fellow beardsmen.
So wouldn't they? But Indy has to lose a higher round pick per start, correct? With Wentz. So if he plays like over 12
Are they going to try to
games-
gamify this?
I don't know, but I mean, there's obviously incentive for them to quickly figure out if Wentz is their guy and then make a call before they have to. I think it's the difference between a first and a second round. That's a talk for a different story, but I think that's a good
Story for a different
quarterback
talk.
duo to debate.
There you go. Yeah. Where was it? I just had it. Carson Wentz going in the middle, end of the 12th, QB 19. Clark, wrap up our thrift shopping.
Yeah, so with later round quarterbacks, there's so many available in a regular 12 team, one QB league on the waiver wire from week to week. You can kind of cobble something together. So I think Fitzpatrick is probably, Fitzpatrick and Mayfield are that safer pick. They can definitely outperform, but I think no one would question that Desean Watson, were he to play, will probably finish the highest of any QB so far that we've mentioned. Now,
Seems like a
will
fair
he
bet.
play is obviously a very serious question that needs to be addressed. And I'm not going to go into it here. But he's either going to miss miss some time, play the whole season, or miss the whole season. We know it's going to be one of those three things. And if you draft him, you're probably going to start him every week that he's available, unless you decide to draft Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. And even then, you'll probably be looking at matchups. That's how good Desean Watson is. So right now he's going in the 11th round. I feel like if it sticks like this, you spend your 10th round pick on Desean Watson. The opportunity cost for Desean Watson is like Latavius Murray and Rob Gronkowski. Like those are the guys going in this part of the draft. So by picking a guy who may miss the entire season or may end up as the QB1 for 12 games, you get a whole lot of value super late, and you can still pick up apparently Baker Mayfield like 4 rounds later and be okay if you just completely miss on Watson.
The logic is flawless, Clark. Logic is flawless. And let's just very nicely transition then into guys we're avoiding, or also known as
No, sir, not me.
Because Nick is avoiding Desean Watson at all costs.
Yeah. So, okay. So unfortunately, this does have to do with the 20 plus accusations of sexual misconduct against Desean Watson. I personally have never heard of a case where in the NFL where there are over 20 accusers. The most recent thing that comes to mind is like Darren Sharper, and that was post NFL, and I think that was like 12. This is a totally new situation for, I think, the average football fan. In a lot of cases, there's like one person that, the authorities have to investigate. The complexity here is way deeper than anything like any of us have ever had anything to do with. For this reason, I've been trying to turn to sources that are far more informed with this stuff than I am. So criminal lawyer Drew Davenport is on he's also on the Football Guys staff. He's had a lot of interesting threads where he just tweets about the ways in which he thinks that this situation might play out, whether that is a settlement, whether that is found guilty, innocent, all that kinds of stuff. As of now, in his opinion, from what I was just recently reading, I think he was saying that hoping for 8 games is probably the most that we might have for 2021. Going by that, like just saying best case scenario, were that the case, Desean Watson is going to be entering a situation where he hasn't practiced, and he's now playing with 1, new players, and 2, the worst roster that he's ever been surrounded by. And that's saying something with Houston. Given that, this is not someone who I want to add to my roster, period. And I'm speaking purely from a win-loss perspective here. This is not a guy who I can advise drafters to take a chance on.
Yeah, I think you really outlined the reason not to take Watson, right? He missing some of the season, maybe missing 8 games. And I think to just make sure that I'm not brushing that over, that's absolutely a possibility. One of the reasons he is a target for me, though, is because of all of the unknowns, right? We don't know this. Very smart people are guessing at what they think the outcome will be. and guessing better like 60% of the time is a real skill that some people have. But weighing that with what we've seen from the NFL as far as discipline goes, which is seemingly at the whim of how Roger Goodell feels that day, 8 games of Desean Watson for a 10th round pick. I think if they told me at the beginning of the year, I'd still take that shot. But Nick, you're totally right. He may miss the whole season. Roger Goodell could wake up angry one day and just put him on the exempt list, a la Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, the I guess the final thing I didn't touch on is that I don't know how committed he is to not ever playing in Houston, right? There's also the idea
true.
that he's requested a trade, and like depending on
even if he is allowed to play in the NFL, like is he going to play, or is he going to be like, all right, now that that's passed, also BT Dubs, I still went out of Houston, I'm not playing for this team, which would if from a career perspective, like you said, Nick, possibly the worst roster he's ever played for, certainly the worst roster in the NFL, wouldn't be a bad career decision to like not play behind this offensive line in this team. But
I think it's important to address the Watson accusations. Like, we don't want to pull a Barnwell and just kind of gloss over it because it makes us a little bit uncomfortable to talk about. It's something that, like, I mean, fantasy football is just all numbers in an app, and, we tune into Red Zone. So sometimes we're not even fully invested to like a full game or into these players' lives, and they're just interchangeable trade chips to some of us. But at the same time, this is like a real opportunity to, put your money where your mouth is. If this sort of thing really bothers you, if this is something that you just can't abide, like, I'm going to leave Desean Watson on the draft board with Ben Roethlisberger, Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt. Just if that's something that you got to do, then that's something that you got to do. I don't know. All the other fantasy stuff aside, I don't know.
I agree.
It sucks because this is something that just keeps on happening in the NFL and sports and just professional careers, and having that many sexual assault allegations against you is not something that should be ignored.
Yeah, no, well said, Jordan. I certainly agree with that. I think we on this podcast have certainly expressed our distaste for Tyreek Hill as a person off the field, and Desean Watson. There's because of all the accusations that have come forward, I think he would share a similar spot in my fantasy drafting as well. That I won't take him, even if he does play all, I guess now 17 games.
So I do want to say, bringing up the win-loss aspect is just me purely coming at this from an analytical perspective. I think, Pete, you and I talked more about this when we were still on the Fake Teams platform as the news was breaking, that this seems like, again, 20 plus accusations, and the details that we've been able to read certainly seems to indicate a pattern of behavior that might indicate crimes were committed here. That's my personal thoughts on it. I don't know, but the facts that we have been able to read do not look good.
The speculation of the prosecuting attorney that we have been able to read do paint a terrible light. But there's no need for us to go ahead and judge what has happened when we don't know. A lot of the other folks that we've mentioned here have been caught on tape performing very heinous acts. And there is a difference between being accused of something and being caught on tape for everyone to see. Not defending Desean Watson, not defending someone who does this, but I guess I will be the one that has to say, guys, being accused of something doesn't mean that you did it, even if you're accused over and over and over. Like, repeating a lie over and over is a great way to make someone believe something, and we just don't know, right? So that's one of the great things about fantasy is we all get to make our own choice on who we're going to have on our team, but there's some pretty big differences between some of the names thrown around in my book. But that's why I have my opinion on what I would do with Watson, and that's why there's usually 11 other people in your league, and you get to compete to see who's the smartest.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not stating that I know one way or another. Just, I think, as we all have here, opining on what I think happened, and that's all we can really do.
All right, let's move on to other guys we're staking away from now more so just a pure football perspective. And Kyler Murray to me going as the QB3, end of the fourth round, just feels rich to me. I'm worried about particularly a rushing regression for Murray. He was the QB2 last year, but thanks primarily in large part to the first half of the season where he scored 10 rushing touchdowns. From week 11 onward, he only rushed for 1 touchdown. He went from the QB1, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy from weeks 1 through 10 to the QB 14 from weeks 11 onward. Again, it's just like I know Patty, for instance, is very high on Kyler Murray. He has him as his QB2 this year, ranked as his QB2. And another year in the offense, we could see Murray continue to develop. But I would much rather have Lamar Jackson, much rather have Dak Prescott, all of whom are going later than Murray. And at that ADP, I'm just going to stay away from Murray this year. I'm too worried about a possible step back. And if you're spending a 4th round pick on a quarterback, you have to make sure that he's going to be a top 3, a top 2 option, really, honestly. And I think Murray could easily be still be a top 10, but more on the backside of 5, like an 8. So
I almost went Murray here as well. Not because I don't think he's a good quarterback, but because I'm just not sure if Cliff Kingsbury is really the guy that's going to get the most out of him. I ultimately backed off though, because in his first 2 years, he's QB6 and QB3. So I'm like, that's fine. I'm comfortable with him finishing top 10.
Yeah. I mean, he's been good. No doubts about it. The rushing regression is the thing I'm most worried about. Jordan, who did you pick then for your player who you're having no part of this year in fantasy?
So the player that I'm going to avoid is Matthew Stafford. I just think that he's going to end up getting drafted a little bit too high. Let me check to make sure I have this ADP right. Is going as QB 11 in the 8th round, which I think is fine, but I also think that people are going to get just a little bit too excited about him being on the Rams. And I'm not sure he's a top 10 fantasy QB. He hasn't had a top 10 year in 3 years now. And the only seasons he hasn't thrown double-digit picks are both seasons in which he hasn't played more than 8 games. So he likes to give the ball away to the other team quite a bit. He also just doesn't have the rushing upside to kind of cap his floor. He hasn't rushed for a rushing touchdown since 2016. And in his 12-season career, he's only reached 100 yards in a season 5 times. Not a game, in a season. Those are like some Tom Brady level numbers right there. I think McVay does give him a boost, but I'm afraid of his ADP in round 8, whereas maybe it's just because I have like a Rams fan or two in my life that are just going to be like, oh yeah, we got our guy now. I think he should more closely be in like the 10 to 11 round range or QB range, like behind Tannehill, like in that Matt Ryan sort of ballpark.
Interesting. All right. I have lots to add, but I'll add it later in our builds predictions.
Yeah. I'll squeak in here real quick and say that I've got him in line with ADP as the 11th quarterback being taken. Jared Goff has been a top 15 quarterback in 3 of the last 4 years, and he has trouble thinking under center. So I think getting a smart guy, like guy who's smart enough to be overall first pick overall, a quarterback for 10 plus years at this point, and he can still make every throw on the field. Like the only thing we can hope for is if he had a rushing floor, but it's going to be wheels up in the Rams offense like we haven't seen before.
Clark, wrap us up. Who's the quarterback you're avoiding?
Yeah, so this one's just gotten a little bit out of hand for me, and it's Jalen Hurts. I know people are really excited about his rushing ability, and went back and watched the 5 games that he played last year, and he is an exciting player. But my brain has decided that we're going to look at the 4 or 5 game span that we see from a lot of young quarterbacks look really good, and not move him to the QB7 next year, a la Drew Lock had a couple of good games, and we got really excited because I don't think Jalen Hurts is very good. Now, you don't have to be very good at quarterback with a rushing floor like that to be very good at fantasy. And so if Jalen Hurts is like the QB 11 or the QB 12, that makes perfect sense to me. But I think that when I looked, he was the QB 7 going ahead of guys that I do feel have a capped upside compared to Hurts, but are better bets like, Tom Brady and Matt Stafford. I feel like those guys are going to finish better than Jalen Hurts this year. So I feel like the hype's gotten a little bit out of hand with him. I never want to root against a young player, but he's just at the QB 7. He's just not going to be on any team this year.
So I did a quick refresh on Fantasy Football Calculator. Jalen Hurts is right now, according to them, the QB 11 going in the middle of or beginning of the 8th round. But that might be, that's Fantasy Football Calculator. I don't know if Best Ball has different outings. He's certainly a quarterback whom there is lots of excitement about his potential. And I could see, I do agree with you, Clark, that if he's sneaking up into that like QB 8 through 6 range, that's too rich for my liking. Even 11 is there are some question marks there. And most notably, it's more of just like, how much do we trust this Eagles offense to be good enough to like kind of support QB1 or upper echelon, upper tier QB1. So I think like Ryan Tannehill, whom Jalen Hurts is going ahead of like Joe Burrow, Ryan Tannehill, Matt Ryan, Baker, Kirk Cousins, a fair number of those guys I think I would rather have over Hurts right now.
So I've got Hurts as my quarterback 10. I might move him down a little bit because he does make me nervous, but I was kind of giggling at the strength of schedule metrics on Sharp Football Stats. The one thing that he has that's tough this year is their pass defenses in terms of efficiency. Opposing rushing offenses, opposing passing offenses, opposing run defenses are all a walk in the park. So he's either going to have too many interceptions or he's going to run for 150 yards
or
a
both.
game.
He's going to be the most aggravating quarterback ever in fantasy where he runs for 100 yards and a touchdown and then throws 3 picks. And you're like, God damn it. And of course, it's going to be every other game. So you can't even like reliably start him.
This is where I need like the midsummer piece about how the Eagles are reshaping their offense to fit around Jalen Hurts rather than having like kind of forcing him into the Carson Wentz situation, which I don't think was good for anybody. So that's what I really need. Beat reporters, let's get on it.
I need that coupled with the game slowing down for him in year 2. Those combined, and Jalen Hurts is QB1, baby. Drafting him in the first round. Let's ride. That's all I need to be convinced. All right, final stage. Bold predictions, also known as
Do we want to get right?
try to cover all spectrums of music with these categories. All right, I'm going to start off our bold prediction segment because Jordan is not a fan of Matt Stafford. I think Matt Stafford finishes a top 5 quarterback this year in fantasy. That's my bold prediction for you. I just think that Sean McVay's offense has made Jared Goff. Back in 2018, Jared Goff was the QB 6 playing with Sean McVay. Stafford is a much better quarterback, playing with the best offense he's possibly ever had, and with the best talent that he's ever had, with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, and you have Tyler Higbee and Cam Akers in the backfield. 2015 to 2017, Stafford was regularly hitting the kind of mid-tier QB1 option. My boldness is telling me this is a career year for Stafford, and maybe it all goes downhill after that. But one phenomenal year with his first time with Sean McVay in a different place outside of Detroit. So I'll buy the bold.
Yeah, I'm with you. Willing to overlook the Matt Patricia years, willing to overlook the Lions ruining the careers of outstanding players like Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders. I think Matt Stafford's really good. And like you said, Jared Goff has been, pretty good functionally in fantasy offenses. But I don't know, this is why he's the 9th, 10th, 11th quarterback. New place, new wide receivers.
It could all also
offense.
just like explode and be terrible.
I think Matthew Stafford finishes as a top 5 quarterback if like 4 to 5 other starting quarterbacks get hurt, because that means he would have to outperform like Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, all of whom have better rushing floors. And I will add that Jared Goff being a top 15 quarterback kind of comes in part because he can scoot a little bit too. So he's not like a terrible athlete. I don't know. Matthew Stafford, I'll buy going top 10, but top 5 is going to be an awesome year for him. Just give him a new contract after that.
Sign him to a 10-year deal.
I think his performance this year, I think that top 5's too rich. I think his performance might
It is called bold predictions, you guys.
You're
not
right,
lukewarm takes.
I think that it'll kind of mirror fantasy point wise Tom Brady's 2020. Might take him a little bit to start hitting, but he's going to be really consistent once he starts to hit.
Yeah. Jordan, give us your bold prediction for the QBs this year.
All right. Mine's not as spicy, but I put Matt Ryan on top 10 watch. In the past 5 seasons, Matt Ryan has been QB 12, 10, 2, 15, and 2. He's currently listed as QB 15, so I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for him to jump up 5 more slots. He's a little bit older now, but he's always just been a consistent walking 4,500 yard passing QB. Like no matter what, part of that happens to be because he plays in Atlanta, which is playing in a dome. Just ask Drew Brees, like the rival Saints has helped aging QBs age a little bit more gracefully. He'll play 10 games in a dome this year. And the only outdoor game that might give him a little bit of issue in terms of like, older man arm is in December is against Buffalo in week 17. That could be a truly terrible bad weather game for him. But they finished 13th in pass DVOA last season. I think they've got a little bit better passing offense wise. They lost Julio Jones, but they tend to lose Julio Jones every now and then anyway. The running game will be a little bit better, so that'll provide a little bit of relief because they won't be handing the ball to Todd Gurley and his fragile knees. And they'll likely be running a little bit more creative of an offense with your guy, Kyle Pitts, Pete, and Hayden Hurst being able to run some 12 personnel sets. Hopefully they can get a little bit creative with that. So Matt Ryan on top 10 watch is my prediction.
Plus Arthur Smith is like
I completely forgot. That should have been the linchpin of my argument is Arthur Smith. I totally dropped the ball on that one.
I mean, he made Ryan Tannehill good.
Yeah. I mean, Arthur Smith brought in Cordarrelle Patterson to be the starting running back for the Atlanta Falcons.
Clark learned how to tweet threads purely for this take. It's the greatest take in the world.
Yeah. Cordarrelle, you should go to my Twitter. It's awesome. Cordarrelle Patterson, giant, a la Derrick Henry, is going to take over that RB1 role from not very good Mike Davis. I like Mike Davis and Cordarrelle Patterson even possibly threatening to get touches as a mark in the good category for Matt Ryan. It's going to be him again. And in those seasons where he was, a really highly ranked QB finishing for the year, he was playing, for Kyle Shanahan and was it in the offense. And they didn't make a lot of moves to shore up the running game. So it's going to be Matt Ryan again. So, I mean, playing in the domes, like you mentioned, he's good. He's older,
with a
but
garbage defense too.
Yeah.
You're
getting a huge discount from, dynasty players but dynasty doesn't matter in redraft.
Yeah. Ryan's going to be really efficient. I think that some of his raw totals are going to be hurt by the departure of Julio Jones. Like if Julio were there, then I'd be much more into Ryan as a weekly quarterback one. As you guys know,
Kyle Pitts better than Julio. So.
Okay, sure. But anyway, I'll stuff the jokes because we're running long on time here. I think Matt Ryan can have a very efficient, fun year this year.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. Not as saucy as my top 5, but we'll move on. Nick, what's your bold prediction?
Yeah, I guess mine's just kind of a prediction more than a bold one. Again, not someone who I really want to associate with, but I think that Jameis Winston is going to end up being the starting quarterback this year. I think he's going to start. My official prediction is over 12 games this season. I don't think that he got the start last year because the schemes are going to be, there will be some overlapping principles from Sean Payton's time there, but basically having Taysom Hill last year use his legs to replace Breeze's short dump offs was an easier thing to try to implement than a human jugs machine in Winston. Now, I think that Winston will run into issues where if they get up early, he might get pulled towards the end of the third quarter and they'll run the ball out with Taysom Hill. But I think that Winston is going to be the starter this year. The reports, I mean, you have to love the reporting done by Nick Underhill on Winston's, saying that he's starting to see the game a little bit differently. He seems to be
that LASIK vision, baby. He can see 20/20 now.
And now he's no longer, walking around with eyes almost as bad as mine. As a side thing, Michael Thomas, I think we might need to start really ratcheting him up in the rankings as we get
Nick,
closer.
you got to watch out though, because you got a wheel bet on that he's going to finish. You think Justin Jefferson's going to finish ahead of Michael Thomas? I have this in writing with Clark.
You know what? I probably got a wheel bet that says the opposite from the week before. I do not keep track of my wheel bets.
That's how you do
I
it.
do, baby. They're paying out.
Yeah, we should. Okay, no, it's gonna get too complex. I was gonna force one in there, but no. Okay, we'll hit the wheel again next week. But yeah, I think Winston's gonna bring some fantasy goodness to the offense.
I mean, as having a wheel bet with Clark about Taysom Hill not starting week 1 for the Saints, am loving this. I'm all for it. Of course, what's going to happen is Taysom Hill will start week 1 for like the first play, and technically that'll make me have to pay a wheel bet.
WW.
UCW. Clark, wrap us up. Final bold prediction.
I'll make mine quick. Number
Really
10.
hitting the nail into the Jalen Hurts coffin.
Yeah, number 10 QB by ADP, Jalen Hurts will finish behind number 20 QB Tua Tagovailoa in points per game, whatever. People are sleeping on Tua at their detriment this season.
I kind of feel that too. I don't know how to talk myself into it in terms of like what Tua's ceiling actually is, but I do feel like people are sleeping on Tua and this Miami offense, because this offense has a shit ton of weapons and a lot of speed that can do some damage in Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle and
props to Clark having Will Fuller up there, wide receiver 17.
Hey man,
I mean, once a Texan, always a Texan.
He was down on him when he was a Texan. I was a wide receiver 12 last year. Clark was like,
well, that's just Clark. Clark also just
like,
can't. Clark absolutely just hates his own team. It's
when it's too close, you get involved. It's like you not liking DK Metcalf because he plays for the Seahawks. If he just played for another team, you would love him.
Nick is
But he doesn't.
This is my year. I also, to be fair, have ranked Derrick Henry consistently like 7th and 8th and talked about how I don't care for him and have admitted I am wrong. Derrick Henry is my number 2 running back, and he will be until he decides to retire. I was wrong.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, there you go. All the good quarterback information you could possibly want, all in one neat little / very long podcast. That's all we got for you this week. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice, and make sure to follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF. Also, like we said at the middle of the show, if you do enjoy listening to the show, think about supporting us over on our Patreon, patreon.com/NerdBallFF. There are plenty of perks for the subscribers, and we, of course, appreciate whatever you're willing to contribute. You can follow myself on Twitter at PeteMRogers, follow Clark at NFL Clark, Jordan at Jordan_Smith27, and Nicholas at Ginger_Nick without a K. And of course, make sure you check out all the amazing content we're putting over on the site, nerdballff.com. It is QB week there. We're going to have sleepers. We're going to have targets. We're going to have players to avoid. We're going to have the whole 9 yards. So make sure you are following along with us this week. Until next week, my fellow nerds.